This video is brought to you by Letsynthisize Academy, the #1 place for practice-oriented courses for serious music producers.
Yo, Billain'S here, welcome to the newest Synthesize Sunday episode. A lot of you on Patreon have been asking how to create those insane flangery, filtery basses like Billain'. In this video I will break down the techniques, show you the key tricks and walk you through how to build a similar drop from scratch like this. You can grab this project from my Patreon below and click here if you want to learn a lot more about music production, because I have awesome start and finish courses, but it's time to jump right into it. Okay, so first let's talk about how to create this Sweepy, Billain'-like filtery, flangery stuff, what you need for this. The first step is always have a strong inharmonic sound, and using FM is the best way to do that. Now you can use phase plan or operator, but honestly I don't suggest you to use serum or current, because the number of oscillators are limited in this synth. And to create really nice sounds you need more than 2 oscillators. Okay, so when you have the strong fundamentals, strong source sound, you want to apply lots of filter sweeps like notch filter or low pass filter. If you want, you can use band pass filter, but the point is to have as much movement as possible to basically mess up the whole frequency spectrum. And when you start distorting it and compressing it, you create a sound that has lots of movement in it, and that is where the fun begins. So filter movement and filter or flanger, and there is a secret sauce that I'm going to show you in a bit, how to create really nice sweepy sounds like Billain'. But basically the fundamental sound should have lots of higher overtones, like metallic overtones, and then when you start processing it with flangers or filters or even high pass filters if you keep the low end, and apply the magic trick that I'm going to reveal in a bit, you can create magic. Okay, so the first step is to create a MIDI that contains your main note, obviously the root of your song, and some other notes, especially 1 or 2 octaves higher, so we need to have lots of pitch movement, pitch bending kind of stuff. So this is how it sounds now. So let's set the time and the glide. So right now we have some really nice woo kind of stuff for the pitch gliding effect. Then we have to set the voices to 1. So we have a monophonic sound that don't have polyphonic notes, especially with basses, it just makes no sense. Okay, so let's tweak the pitch envelope a little bit, like adding some attack and cranking up the pitch envelope. So on every first note, we're going to have a little punch. It's not that important. If you want to skip this step, you are free to do that. Okay, so on the first oscillator, I use a square 3. But on oscillator B, let's use a custom waveform, something like that. And let's add some FM to it, but let's crack the chords to 4. So with this we are creating a really nice metallic kind of tone, and that is important because we want to have some really rich overtone from the sound to be able to filter it, adding some other overtones, you know, to be creative with that, but the source sound should contain some weird or FME or whatever, basically just you need overtones. That's the most important part here. Okay, let's go to oscillator 3. Let's make again a custom waveform. Let's crank up the chorus. And on oscillator D, another sign on chord 30. So it's metallic and also really heavy and crunchy with lots of overtones basically. And let's a soft shaper and crank up the shape drive. So add a little more crunch to it. But it could be a good idea to, again, as we played with the transient, so the first few milliseconds of the sound with the pitch, let's do the same thing with the filter. So let's add some curve to it, some attack, and pull back the delay and play around with the envelope. Because we want to play with the filter too. So let's crank up the resonance and record some crazy modulation on the low pass filter. So this guy here. So this is the fundamental of the sound. We have a really rich in harmonics kind of sound that we filter, and then we start distorting and, you know, adding different effects to create a sound that will contain lots of different little treats and surprising elements inside of that. But the first step was to create a rich in harmonic sound and start filtering it, and we just did that. Okay, so the next step is drop a saturator, obviously with the soft clip turned on, and choose the sinoid fold and add some drive to it. Right, this is really drastic this time, and so this is why we need to pull back the dry wet, and then add the flanger. That brings some more metallic overtones to the sound. That is a classic effect to create even more metallic overtones to the sound. But it is important to pull back the phase, so we don't want to have any stereo effect on the bass. Let's set the time to 0.76 milliseconds. But I want the movement to be faster, so let's crank up the rate to 1 instead of 2 and pull back the amount a bit. Cool, so we need an OTT, but add some volume to it. So that's so cool, because on the filtered part, the very heavily filtered part, we still get some nice high overtones. And that is the goal here, basically, to create a long sausage of waveform that contains very, very different kind of sounds inside it. Okay, but it's not enough, so let's drop another multiband compressor, but this time only the multiband compression preset, so I would say this is a light OTT. Again, let's add some output. Okay, but after that we need to clean up the whole sound because we have lots of stuff on the mid-highs and the mid-lows. So let's drop an EQ8, pull back the 200 Hz and the 7K. And this is cool because we keep the tone of the sound, but this way we are making it a lot more easier to listen to. Okay, let's add another saturator and with some drive, and obviously with the soft clip on. Let's move forward with adding different effects, then compressing it and distorting it maybe, then clean it up. So this is the whole process. Let's go with the phaser this time. So previously we had a flanger, but this time a phaser can come handy. Then another multiband compression, because I wanted to have a more even sound after the phaser, you know, to compress those little notches a little more. Okay, so this is the fun part. When the low-pass filter filters the sound really heavily, so the cutoff is really low, we want to add some extra noise on top of that sound where you don't really have other higher overtones. And the erosion is a good tool for that, but let's choose a little lower in frequency kind of noise, widen it and play around with the amount. So this is how it sounds now. It's a great way to have an illusion of a really heavily distorted sound. Okay, another fun part comes when we add an EQ peak that moves in the spectrum up and down, creating some very interesting modulation, especially if we start distorting the whole sound after that, and that little peak going back and forth in the spectrum will create different higher overtones, and that is lovely. Okay, so I'm boosting up 130 Hz and let's add some modulation to it, and this is how it sounds. Okay, so the problem is we have a little too much on the low one, so let's filter it, because when this EQP goes on the lower part, so on a really low subby frequencies, I'm afraid that it will be too much, especially if we distort it after that. So it can be a good idea to pull it back a little, not too much, then a little more in the mid-low range, and on the mid-highs around 7K. Yeah, because the sweepy frequencies are too much, so one more at around 10K, or just use a low pass instead. Yeah, that's the best. Okay, so let's go crazy with the distortion. My favorite is the fuzz, but it's a little too much, and obviously we need to keep the sub and pull back the dry wet. Yeah, so I had to previously tweak the gain because I keep it on 0. It's just too much, so we cannot really pull back the input gain. I can do that here in the EQ output gain. So let's put it right around -11 for just the right amount of distortion. Okay, it's time to add some notch, because right now we are having a really nice and rich in harmonic sound that is very different from the source, so where we started in. But obviously I want to make it move. Right now I don't want to add the modulation curve because we have some really nice LFO built into it. So let's add a little on resonance and crank up the rate and the amount. So right now this notch goes back and forth in the spectrum, creating this sweepy kind of sound that I really love. Now another cleanup is necessary, a little on the mid-lows, 160 Hz, but a little more to have a really nice and deep sound, but we want to get rid of the boomy frequencies, and the boomy frequency is present at around 200 Hz. So that's why I'm treating it, and the high cut, because we just created again another huge amounts of high frequencies that we don't need. Okay, and the final step is to compress it really heavily, so we have an even sausage kind of waveform. So let's drop the glue compressor, crank up the ratio, pull back the threshold, and then some makeup. Yeah, that's cool, but I want to have another instance of this. And a final limiter with a huge gain compensation to crunch everything to the limit. Yeah, so the final sound, the source sound is done. Right now we need to bounce it and drop it inside a sampler or a simpler. Okay, so one very important thing to look after, if you have a look on the waveforms that I just exported, you may see some weird things here. Also the next one. The waves completely phase invert each other. And that is coming from one of the effects inside of the chain. That is very important because if you see this kind of effect, this problem, you completely kill your bass. You have two solutions. First, if you spend too much time on finding the best bass shots and you already completed the groove, you don't want to do it again, like going back to the source and re-export the whole thing. You just need to have a utility tool. So instead of going mono, you just want to choose one side, for example, the left or the right. And why is that? If you choose the mono, the two signals are going to sound. And this is the moment where the two sides are going to kill each other, phase invert each other. So you're going to lose all the low frequencies of your bass, and that is obviously not what you want. So instead of this, what you want to do is just choose even this side of the bass or this side, and this way it is guaranteed that the two sides won't phase cancel each other, because you're dealing from this point, you're dealing with only one side. Downside of this, that you will lose the stereo informations if you have. So the best solution obviously is to go back to your chain and find the problem. So in operator I don't have spread because this is the only thing that could create stereo sound. The saturator does not have anything. The phaser flanger effect can have one, and that is the phase that separates the left and the right side. So as you can see here, but because it is on zero, so the effect is mono, this cannot be the problematic part. OTT, another multiband compression, EQ, saturation, again cannot create stereo effect, but the phaser can, because as you can see, the phase is on 180. The two sides are moving separate from each other. So the solution is pull back the phase. So with this you kill the stereo effect on the sound. Again, multiband compression, erosion is not a stereo effect. EQ, the pedal, auto filter, another EQ, compressor, all these are non-stereo effects. Okay, so we have the final waveform that sounds like this. Lots of pitch movement, lots of filter movement, lots of effect modulation inside of that, and I bet we're going to find golden sounds. But because we want to create those sweepy sounds with lots of like filtery or flangery movement, I don't want to use it as an audio track or inside an audio track, but I want to use it inside a sampler. But because the sampler does not really give me the chance to play with the sample offset, I need to use simpler, but Go Sound build up an awesome rack that is going to be very helpful this time. And that is awesome because everything is set up here. So with the sample start position, pitch envelope, the glide time, the pitch envelope decay, and a transposition. Okay, so from this point we need to just drop the sample inside simpler. And this is how it sounds this time on D-sharp 0. And because this bass is originally in G-sharp, I need to pull it up. Cool, so this is set up, but I want to go very sweepy. And there is a good solution, a good trick for that. Let me group this rack, duplicate it, and just take the second one in the controls. Let me call this detuned, and pull back the detune and pull back the output volume both of the simplers so we won't have any digital clipping. And when you start detuning your bass, we have this awesome sweepy sound, so the more you pull it back, But if you sustain your bass too long, obviously the two basses will distance from each other too much, so this is good only for short bass steps. But basically this is the trick. There's one more thing to do: copy all the macros to the main rec macro. Okay, everything is set up. But let's add some process. Let's add an EQ8, boost the lows a little more. Maybe a little more on the mids. And on the tops, definitely on the tops. Cool, and a saturator to the end. So everything is set up. Right now our only job is to find some good parts moving the sample start knob. It could be a good idea though to high pass the second instance, so we won't have any conflicting low end stuff. So with this you can easily create really nice flangy, sweepy sounds, bass shots basically, that you can, you know, just resample out to a different audio channel and have this sort of stuff. And all along with the drums. Okay, grab this project from my Patreon and click here for my academy if you want to learn a lot more about music production. See you guys next time. Peace.